ود مسلني عاكي تعجبتها وطحن بلاي قر ما عدوبها رجع قلبه خدي أنت الحاشدين عطوا بعد سرك ما خايت ول لليش 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 عصبين قال لي ديخا بأخم عبادي فالي خاد سويكاني أما كل سنادو أنا نداق والعفوي نبدا مسلني نعيك تحاري الناس فلتن حالي سيت دفر بتحي حيلكم النخا حيلكم النخا كمي لخ قوم دوي لبكرميخا دوي لبكرميخا تحت صدليخا قلت يوم السخا إيدك أسك زحلمو خون معاخا ود مسلمي عاكي تعجبتخا لو ترحم بلاي قر ما عدوبخا رجع قلبه خدي أنت الحاشدين عطوا بعد سرك ما خايت ول لليش 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 عصبين قال لي ديخا بأخم عبادي فالي خاد سويكاني أما كل سنادو أنا نداق والعفوي نبدا مسلني نعيك تحاري الناس فلتن حالي سيت دفر بتحي حيلكم النخا حيلكم النخا كمي لخ قوم دوي لبكرميخا دوي لبكرميخا تحت صدليخا قلت يوم السخا إيدك أسك زحلمو خون معاخا للي 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 ود مسلنا ود تومسب تحزو وين الكادمو كم تعتبقى قرصو تثبت هنا عخاك عخيو عبرو قزت فقرخا تمني تيسم ود مسلنا بعل ورق قاما أطانق للاي ودي فرقا ختما تجند فتاريو عبا خمتاوي أنا خود صديقي كيموت كبدوي كيموت كبدوي كيموت كبدوي كيموت كبدوي كيموت كبدوي للي 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 ود مسلنا ود تومسب تحزو كوين الكادمو كم تعتبقى قرصو تثبتينا عخاك عخيو عبرو قزت فقرخا تمني تيسم ود مسلنا بعل ورق القاما أطانق للاي ودي فرقا ختما تجند فتاريو عبا خمتاوي أنا خود صديقي كيموت كبدوي كيموت كبدوي كيموت كبدوي كيموت كبدوي كيموت كبدوي للي 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 كيموت كبدوي كيموت كبدوي كيموت كبدوي
Aquaba, greetings. Hello, happy Sunday. We hope you are reaching your highest level of mental, physical, and spiritual strength, and that you are well. Or if you're not, that you're rapidly approaching being as well as you could possibly be. We are glad that you decided to join us today for this week's episode of Our Ancestors' Voices, a weekly program sponsored same time, same places by the All African People's Revolutionary Party. And today, a very essential and critical topic. The topic is Zionist Israel and Africa. Of course, Zionist Israel has been on people's lips for weeks now, since early October, for some of us for decades, but not much is discussed or understood about the relationship between Zionist Israel and Africa. And so the purpose of this session today is to talk specifically about how Zionist Africa, I'm sorry, oh my goodness, boy, that's the wrong thing to say. Zionist Israel is without question a reflection of uh, the exploitation that they engage in against Africa. And if it were not for their Zionist Israel's exploitation of Africa, it would be very difficult for the Zionist regime to engage in its policies of oppression and control of occupied Palestine and oppression against the Palestinian people. So we're glad that you're able to join us today for this session. We give honor to the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. We honor their struggle. We had a program a couple of weeks ago about them, and we will have another one coming up in just another couple of weeks. We will continue to raise this question that this land belongs to the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere, and they must get their land back. And of course, we give honor and respect to our African ancestors, who are the reason that we are here. And certainly they want us to talk about the impact of Zionist Israel and its exploitation of Africa. So we are honored to be here today to talk to you about this very, 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 very important topic. And we will get started with just our brief introductions as we do weekly. And we just want you to know that Our Ancestors' Voices is sponsored by the All African People's Revolutionary Party, as we said, the AAPRP. And that the AAPRP is a revolutionary, independent, mass Pan-African political party that is based in Africa. And our objective is Pan-Africanism, which we define correctly as one unified socialist Africa. And our work to achieve Pan-Africanism is outlined in clear terms in Kwame Nkrumah's Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare, which is here. And that work is to unite all of the revolutionary Pan-African formations on the ground throughout Africa who agree that Pan-Africanism is what we need. And Pan-Africanism is a total liberation and unification of Africa under scientific socialism. In Our Ancestors' Voices, this program hosted each week, same time, same places, by the APRP organizers, myself, Ajamu, and Shakura, my daughter, biologically and ideologically. So to get us started on today's topic, Zionist Israel, filthy Zionist Israel, and Africa, I'll turn it over to Shakura.
Greetings. Thank you so much, sir. Appreciate it. Greetings, everyone. Hope you are safe and well. So we are at a crossroads here where we need to kind of break down a little bit of what is going on. Comrade, are we on slide number 3? I think I might have skipped ahead here. I think we're on slide number 4, and I'm trying to make sure I'm not messing anything up. No, you're good. Thank you. Appreciate you. So we want to start with acknowledging you all that the system we live in has based all of its propaganda, everything that you may know about Zionism, based off of lies. That's what we start with. And we understand that because you can see the images on the slide. Israel has a deep and fundamental right to exist. Israel has a right to defend itself. Like, these are very intentional messages that have been framed, and some of us have allowed it to program our way of thought since the beginning of time, or since October, as my comrade Jamu pointed out, because we're not in a position where we have been studying this for the last, several decades that this has taken place. We're not in a position where we are working with Palestinians to actively help them get their land back. Many of us are not in positions where we were even aware that this was a reality for Palestinian people. And so that's exactly what Zionism wants. That's exactly what Zionism's principles are all about. Zionism, the trick of Zionism, if you really break it down, is to make sure that the supporters of the system of oppression, they want to make sure that the supporters are convinced, they are completely accepted to the fact that there are lies that are more relevant than having people actually believe the truthful reality. It is actually more convincing and more important and more exercising, if you will, to instead invoke lies and mistruth. And they use victimization to promote those lies. They use religion to promote those lies. They use emotion to promote those lies. These are all tools that they use to confuse us and to make it seem that the propaganda is phasing it out, where, just like with any typical, abuser abusee situation, the abuser tends to advocate as a victim, whereas the abusee is actually the victim. But instead, in our society and how we navigate things, usually the person who speaks out against the abuse is really the problem, right? And so I would argue it's the same with this Occupy Palestine space, where we are literally looking at intruders. We are looking at invaders who have come into someone else's land, taken over their land, bombed and killed them, at least for the last 65, 70 plus years. But yet the people who are fighting back are considered to be the horrible intruders. How is that possible? What sense does that make in any reality that you're thinking of? As you're sitting listening to us right now, that means if you truly believe that, and if you, in fact, have let propaganda warp your brain, then that truly means that as you're sitting here listening to this seminar, I'm assuming you're in some type of space where there might be a roof over your head. So that means when somebody walks into the space that you're in, that you may be paying a monthly rent or mortgage to, by that theory, that means that they can come in and then take everything that you have literally allowed blood, sweat, and tears to have a profit so that you could purchase to have those in your spaces. Now, that doesn't make any sense. That doesn't make any sense. But propaganda has reminded us religiously, pun intended, that this is in fact what's going on. And this is why, you all, the political education, it is so important. It is so important, you all. We've said this before, but it bears repeating. If you do not have a foundational understanding, meaning political education, if you don't understand how to separate the difference between lies and truths, then that means that the people who are pushing the lies out to you are going to continue to work overtime in doing so. Excuse me. That means you are not going to be in a position where you're going to be able to separate what's based on truth versus what's based on a lie. And if you can't separate that, then what good are you to the movement? What good are you to the people? What good are you to the masses of us who are trying to change these conditions? Because we do know the difference. And then we have to waste time talking to you, not waste time, but we have to invest time talking to you and trying to get you to understand what's going on. When in actuality, you can take on some of that labor yourself. You can choose to be unignorant. You can choose to do that. You can choose to do your own research so that you can have more of an understanding of what's going on in the world and how you can do something about it. This is why political education is so important. The All African People's Revolutionary Party wrote a brochure in 1986 called Smash Zionism. It was one of my favorite things to read when I had this on the work study reading list, because it's a very small brochure. It's probably a total of 6 pages. And that's double-sided, by the way. So it's, the left side and the right side. And it just basically very simply writes out what Zionism is, why it's a problem, and how it has impacted Africans as well as Palestinians. And it's one of my favorite pieces on the reading material list because it gives you a very short and sweet but concise understanding of why this is a problem and what are some of the things organizations like the All African People's Revolutionary Party is doing to address it. If I had not chosen to be a part of work study, if I had not chosen to then be a part of the All African People's Revolutionary Party, because work study is a branch within that organization, then I would not have this kind of direct access to increase my political education, which means I would be just as ignorant as every other person out there who thinks that Hamas is the invaders and thinks that Hamas are the people that we need to take down. You're donating money because you're trying to eradicate Hamas, when in actuality, you don't even understand that the victims are continuing to fight back and being blamed for fighting back. So those of you who are parents, when your children are getting bullied, you're upset with your children because they're fighting back? No, you want the bully to stop bullying them. You want the people to stop bothering the people that never asked to be bothered in the first place. This is why it's important to have political education, you all. There's a quote on the very first page of the brochure, and the cover photo is victims of the 1982 Zionist bombing. And this is out of, is it Beirut? I know you'll correct me if I'm wrong, Daddy. So in 1982, the Israeli army ruthlessly bombed civilians, population centers, and refugee camps in Lebanon, and with the most sophisticated US-made weapons. This includes phosphorus and cluster bombs, you all. Over 40,000 innocent people were killed and wounded. And the cover photo documents the whole world to see Israeli crimes against Palestinian people and world humanity. As I said to you, this has been going on for a very long time. And so you can't tell me that if somebody is bringing phosphorus and cluster bombs into a space, that I don't have a right to defend myself. And when I do defend myself, you shame me and make it look like I'm the problem, when in actuality, the only thing I'm trying to do is get my land back. And if that is a crime, then you never should have came to my land in the first place, because it wasn't up for grabs. It wasn't available for you to take it. And that's why we're going to talk more about that tonight, about how propaganda will try to teach you that religion has everything to do with why the land is taken. I used to be confused by that. And I started having more conversations within work study. I started having more conversations with my dad. I'm privileged that the All African People's Revolutionary Party has been working actively to make their stance known so that other people would be able to use them as a political education resource, so that they too could access that brochure and just be able to get a really good foundational understanding. It feels so good when you have access to the truth. It feels so good. And at the end of the day, you receive all this propaganda that's based on lies. You receive all this propaganda that is based on mistruths, and you might believe it. But when you get your hands on that truth, when you get your hands on something that's not based on lies, it's going to register for you differently. Because in the actuality of it all, you and I both know that if somebody walked into your residence right now and told you to get the what out, you would have a problem with that. You and I both know that. We both know that. So if you know that, it has nothing to do with religion. It has nothing to do with the fact that Israel is not a real place in the world, but Palestine is a real place. Like, it has nothing to do with any of those things. At the end of the day, we're talking about humanity and ethics. That's what we're talking about. And we're talking about the fact that you are asking someone to give up everything that was literally theirs just because you have now found a new place to call your landing space. And you have been upset with the fact that they have been fighting for so long that now you're going to find a way to make them look like the enemy. And we both know that that's not right. You all know that that's not right, because deep down you joined this seminar tonight because you still wanted to get more information about this topic. That means that you're curious. That means that you're aware of the fact that this is a problem. And if you know that it's not right, then that means your spark of humanity is still lit. And congratulations, because it's very difficult to keep that spark maintained in the industry that we live in, where people do not matter as much as profit. That is very difficult to do that. So we would continue and think about that a little bit more because, as I said, propaganda will use victimization and reverse victimization, if I will. They will use religion, and they'll use tools such as emotion. They'll use tools such as dehumanizing. They'll use tools such as all these other things to get a certain message across to you. And that's why you have to be smarter than them. That's why you have to equip yourself with the tools that you need. If you were going to a business meeting for your slave that you have, you wouldn't walk into that meeting unprepared. So why would understanding the politics around the world be any different? You need to be prepared for those as well. You need to have your armor for those as well. You need to have your ideological armor equipped, and you need to be ready to have conversations. And if you're not ready to have conversations, then be honest about that and say, I do not know enough about this topic to give my opinion. You should be honest and say, I am ignorant on this and I don't know what I'm talking about. You should be honest and say, I need to check out the All African People's Revolutionary Party Smash Zionism brochure because I don't know anything about this and I need to read up on it. It's okay to say that. It's okay to say that. You know why? Because then you're denouncing the propaganda and you're admitting that you actually have your own research to do, which is very much an okay thing to do in a system that lies constantly. They lie constantly. So it is good for you to assume that you should not trust what they have to say. That means you are actually starting to see things upright for the first time. So these are the things that we have to think about in more context is this is how we're going to navigate this. And at the end of the day, we have to make sure that we understand that we only have our political education to rely on. We have each other and we have our organizations that are working for justice. And those three things are going to keep us steadfast as we continue to work to change the conditions for people. Next slide, please. We can always think about our comrade Sekou Touré and the immortal words, quote, truth crushed to earth 1,000 times will always resurface. And let me not forget to ask you all to bring your attention to the upper right corner. You see the black QR code there. We are continuing to raise money for our comrades in Burkina Faso. We're trying so hard to help them purchase books so that our children on the continent can have some direct, humanizing, justice-loving, Pan-Africanist education that they can have access to instead of reading about Moby Dick, instead of reading about Huckleberry Finn, instead of reading about all the European rhetoric that they don't need to have access to. We want them to have some Pan-Africanist materials so that they can start to develop more of an ideology and an identity of who they are, but more importantly, how much they need to work to help free Mother Africa. That's what we're raising money to get those books for. So please, please, please don't forget to scan that QR code. But yes, going back to our comrade Sekou Touré. So Sekou Touré says, truth crushed to earth 1,000 times will always resurface. No matter how many times you crush it, no matter how many times, it's going to always rise. And I think the more we start to increase our political education around this topic, but also around the indigenous people getting their land back, around Asian descent people getting their land back, of course, around Africans getting our land back, and even around other groups, such as our comrades in Ireland getting their land back, and other colonized groups getting their lands back. Then we can move into people who are being oppressed, and we can start to eradicate homophobia and transphobia. We can start to eradicate Islamophobia. We can start to address patriarchy and truly start to use allies, those who benefit from it, as well as those who suffer from it, to take it down and to terminate it by any means necessary. We can start to move together with our forces because each one of us understands what we have to lose if we're not working together. And the only way we can understand that is because of Sekou Touré's words, because we're all practicing what a truthful reality looks like. We all have truth in our heads and we all are practicing truth. We're practicing integrity so that that truth can be protected. That means we're speaking out against mistruths when we hear people misspeaking about Occupy Palestine. There's a reason, you all, that I'm saying Occupy Palestine. I want you to just count tomorrow how many times you hear people say, quote, Israel. That is not a real place. And I just get so annoyed when people say that because they talk about it like it's a place you can buy a plane ticket to and go. You mean Palestine? That's what you mean. Because if you look on a map, that's what you will see. So again, like the language, you all, it is so important. The truth is coming out through the language, but we have to change the narrative. We shouldn't be saying Israel. We should be saying, occupy Palestine. Oh, yeah, you're talking about occupy Palestine? Yeah, I saw that on the news today. Occupy Palestine, occupy Palestine. It'll start to register differently. It'll start to register differently. I was just talking to a comrade about this the other day. It might have been you, Daddy. I can't even remember. But I said to him, yeah, so I'm noticing that in my friend circle, majority of my friends are all African, but they don't use the term African. They use the term Black, or some of them use the term Afro-American, depending on how they identify. And they know me, I always say African. I used to say African descent, but now I say African. At all means, I say African. And what I've noticed is, I did a little social experiment. What I've noticed is 3 out of my 7 friends are starting to say African more. Now, 3 out of 7 is not the best rate. Like, that's not the best fraction, right? We definitely want those numbers to be higher. But that's 3 more people out of 7 who are now changing their words because they, quote unquote, in their words, want to say what makes me comfortable. And when I said to them, no, you should use a word that makes you comfortable, they said, well, I like African. And I thought to myself, interesting. So I don't really hear them saying Black and Afro-American anymore. Now they're saying African. And if they say Black, they'll say Black and African. So I think at some point, African is going to start to replace. My point is that's the power of consistency with languages. That's my point. And if we continue to perpetuate Occupy Palestine, if we continue to perpetuate the truth, as our comrade Sekou Touré asked us to do, it is going to continue to resurface, you all. And before you know it, more people are going to stop being on the sidelines or straddling the fence, and they're going to start to say Occupy Palestine too. They're going to start to increase their political education because they know that they're ignorant and they know that they need to research and do more so that they can learn more about this topic. And when they find the truth that they are so actively seeking, it is going to be such a breath of fresh air because you have no idea how good it feels to know what the bleep you're talking about when you're talking to someone. And then when you're talking to someone and you know they don't know what they're talking about, it just feels so refreshing because being ignorant is not sexy. It is not sexy by any means. The capitalist imperialist industries want you to be ignorant. They want you to be dumb. They want you to not have any information. The longer that you remain dumb and unaware, the more they continue to con you, the more they continue to pimp you, the more they continue to take all of your resources, all of your materials, all of your opportunities, leaving you with nothing. Don't you understand that? So the more educated you are, because that would be the counter antithesis of that, the more educated you are, the more an opportunity you have to take your stuff back, to take your land back, to take your power back, to take your dignity back, to take your respect back, to take your humanity, back. The less you will have to rely on capitalism for any of those things because you and your people will have control of your land. You will have control of your resources. And this is not as foreign as some of you might think it is. This is not an abstract idea about having control of land. Our people are fighting right now all over the world. In Haiti, they're fighting. In different parts of the continent, they're fighting. They're fighting because we are winning, you all. And the imperialist colonizers are terrified. So they're continuing to do things to try to slow us down. They're continuing to try to bomb our organizational facilities on the continent as well as in other parts of the world. They are working overtime because, again, we cannot be too educated. The more educated we are, the more control we will take our land back for. And that's a threat to them. That's a threat to their industry. That's a threat to them making money. That's a threat to them being in power over us. It's a threat to them continuing to dehumanize us. So we have to understand with political education, with joining an organization that's working for justice, We're going to start to perpetuate Sekou Touré's words, where we're going to be talking actively about the truth. We're not going to stand down. We're going to speak actively about the truth, because everything is a teachable moment. And if you're engaging with someone who is ignorant about Palestine, you have a moral responsibility to speak up. If somebody was using the N-word and you don't use the N-word, you wouldn't speak up about that? Why is it any different? If someone was saying the word that you all said 2 weeks ago for the holiday in November, you wouldn't speak up and say you should actually be saying Thanksgiving, or you should be saying unthanksgiving. If someone was saying a derogatory term about femme people, you wouldn't speak up about that? It's no different, you all. Palestinians deserve our camaraderie. They deserve our respect. And we have a responsibility to protect their oppression. We have a responsibility to protect that, because their oppression is our oppression. And they have certainly showed up for us. So as I prepare to close, we cannot stress enough that we encourage you to join an organization working for justice. And I truly, truly mean to do that before 2024. I truly, truly mean that, you all, because as you can see, there is still chaos and mayhem going on around the world. We have, people have voted for different people to have been in office. We've had, different things open back up where the world is kind of shifting in a different way. We're continuing to have protests. We're having labor strikes. We're having people who are walking out on jobs because they're sick and tired of being sick and tired. The world is continuing to change, and the masses of people trying to just get some gosh darn respect. And it usually has something to do with land, which equals power, which equals respect. It's usually those three things connected. The people who are striking at your job right now are probably being disrespected because they probably don't own their own land. And if they don't own their own land, then why would the world respect them? Because if you don't own land, then nobody's going to take you seriously. Land produces resources. Land produces materials. You literally have everything if you own land, because you get to determine how that land is being used. So when we think about all of the things happening around the world, that means that joining an organization is really the only way to change those conditions. When you join an organization, you have a better chance of helping people get the land back that was stolen from them. And I said before, that's not an abstract idea. There are people fighting right now, because there are countries in Africa that are still deemed as considered independent because of the fighting that has taken place and because of the fighting that will take place. So we are getting closer to this, and victory is certain. But you have to believe that Sekou Touré knew what he was talking about when he said that truth would continue to resurface. And that starts with us, you all. That starts with us taking responsibility for finding that truth. The only way you can do that is through an organization working for justice, and through increasing your political education, and then sharing what you have learned with the other people in your organization. Because talking about Palestine is one way to address occupied Palestine and Palestinians getting their land back. Ashe.
Ashe, Shakura, thank you very much. And I just wanted to, as we transition into talking about Zionist Israel and Africa, before we begin, remind people to support the Thomas Sankara Center for Liberation and Pan-African Unity. The QR code is on the screen. And then just if people are paying attention to any type of news, any type of information, you've seen in the last few days, Shakur's talking about the importance of land. You've seen in the last few days the destabilization, can't talk, English is not my language, the destabilization efforts in Guinea-Bissau, West Africa, that have been taking place. The attacks against the African Party for the Independence of Guinea-Bissau, the PAIGC, the political party founded by our ideologue, Amilcar Cabral, and the attacks against the work that the PAIGC is doing to be a leading force for revolutionary Pan-Africanism on the African continent. And I just want to encourage you to pay close attention to that. The president of the PAIGC, a good comrade, brother Domingos Pereira, was shot at the other day. Fortunately, he was able to escape any injury, but imperialism never rests. They are doing everything they can to destroy our work, to bring about freedom for African people everywhere on earth. And as a member of the PAIGC and the AAPRP here in the bastion, the dungeons of North America, I'm very concerned about our comrades in Guinea-Bissau. And if you have an ounce of sense, you should be concerned about them also. So pay close attention. There may be some asks that we have to support our comrades in Guinea-Bissau, and we want you to please pay attention so that we can respond, because this is our movement. And if we don't stand up and protect our people who are fighting for our liberation, I don't know who the hell else we think is going to do that. And that's the perfect segue into this question of Zionist Israel. And it's always been built largely on exploiting Africa. Now, Shakur talked about, we didn't, the purpose of today is not to define the struggle in the Middle East. You know, we've done multiple workshops on the question of Zionism. So if you're still confused about that, you know, there are plenty of resources. Shakur gave you the brochure we wrote years ago. But just for the sake of this last few minutes we have here, just remember, when we say Zionism, we're talking about a political movement that is using religion as a shield to justify exploitation of the peoples of the planet Earth, particularly the Palestinian people in occupied Palestine. And Zionism has absolutely nothing to do with Judaism. And that's why the first slide talked about not confusing faith with history. The people who were in that region of the world thousands of years ago were not these European people that are in the so-called state of Israel today. That's what they don't want us to talk about. They don't want you to know that. We've been there 1,000 years. You a damn lie. You ain't been there. Nobody looked like you was in that region thousands of years ago. That's why if people simply cracked open even an imperialist Webster dictionary and looked at the definition of Semite, it's African, Asiatic, Arab people. There's nothing European about the term Semite. So that's just grade school analysis of this question. We're not, again, this is not the purpose of today's workshop. But if you don't know that, you got to go back and understand. Zionism is a political movement. Judaism is a spiritual faith. The two have absolutely nothing to do with one another. The Zionist movement was built on creating the state of Israel. And they wanted to do that to create a powerful nation in the Middle East who could serve the interests of imperialism. Theodor Herzl, the father of Zionism, said that at the founding conference in Switzerland in 1897. And these colonial powers, the evil alliance that existed, which at that time, 100 years ago, Lord Balfour in Britain, the racist apartheid regime in Oceania, what the colonialists call South Africa, Jan Smuts, the premier in then South Africa. And of course, this backward, wretched regime that we live in here, the United Snakes of America, and Woodrow Wilson, who was president then, these three devils combined to form the evil axis, the evil alliance. And they did it based on supporting the establishment of the Zionist state of Israel and relying on using the Zionist state of Israel to serve as the power outpost for imperialism in the Middle East. And one of the ways they devised to finance the Zionist state of Israel was through establishing a relationship with De Beers Diamonds. Now, De Beers Diamonds was founded by Cecil Rhodes, that old nasty syphilis-carrying colonist who, people, we have such a slave mentality. We'll get a scholarship to go, well, I'm a Rhodes Scholar. There's no way in hell I would want to be identified with such a dirty, stink breath, syphilis, scurvy carrying demon like that, Cecil Rhodes. But this criminal created De Beers Diamonds, and the De Beers, they called it something else originally, and then De Beers, that family bought it, the Oppenheimer family, which they still own it to this day. And so they established this relationship, and the point of making that known is that the first way we'll talk about Zionism's exploitation of Africa is the Balfour Declaration was signed in 1917 by Lord Balfour in Britain. And this really opened the floodgates to these Europeans from Europe who said they were Jews, going to occupy Palestine and settling there. This was 1917, decades before the Holocaust, which didn't begin to happen until the early 30s, the early 1930s, when the Third Reich came to power in Germany and created the Nazi Germany. But the point of this is that these folks begin to go there. And so to help finance the Zionist state of Israel, they began to establish the practice of taking diamonds into occupied Palestine in 1948 and establishing an industry in Zionist Israel where these diamonds would be polished there. Now, that was 1948 when the state of Israel was established. Now, today in 2023, the state of Israel polishes anywhere between 35 and 50% of the polished diamonds on the world market today. So these diamonds don't come from the state of Israel. There are no diamond mines that have ever been found that exist in the state of Israel. These are African diamonds that come from Africa, that come from places like the picture you see on your screen, which is the Venetia mine, which is located in Azania, what they call South Africa. It is the largest diamond mine in all of Africa, and Africa has more diamond mines than anywhere else on the planet Earth. Africa has more diamond mines than everywhere else on Earth combined. And this is the largest diamond mine in the world, the picture that you're looking at right now. And this is one of many diamond mines that supply these diamonds that the Zionist state of Israel polishes, which is one of its main domestic gross domestic products for its economy. So the point we're making is that this entire scheme that Zionism has been based on, they had no way to finance it. They're a criminal empire. So their entire scheme has been based on exploiting Africa in order to maintain this Zionist empire and maintain its ability to exploit the Palestinian people. And the United States of America has supported this from the very beginning because they wanted a police officer in the Middle East to represent their brutal, colonial, and capitalist interests all over the world. So now you've got the Zionist state of Israel controlling all of those main shipping routes through the Middle East, the Mediterranean Sea, the Red Sea. They control all of that. They're the dominant force up there. And so if you understand all of this, this is how they control shipping products from the east to the west and the west to the east. This is how they control the entire world economy. And Zionist Israel plays a major role in that. It's not an accident that Zionist Israel was established there in that region. And then the other main shipping route in the world through the Cape in Southern Africa was controlled by apartheid, racist, apartheid South Africa, up until our people at least were able to run the settler colonists out of that position in Azania, South Africa. So this is how they control the world politically and economically, you all. And this is why Zionism had to establish itself by exploiting Africa. This is the only way they can ensure that they had the resources to maintain their dominance, not only just in the Middle East, but around the world. So this was their entire scheme in creating a political movement around a state, the state of Israel, that would serve imperialism. And then the next part we want to talk about is that for Zionism to continue to prosper, they had to continue to control Africa. And this has meant attacking all over Africa where resistance was being established, because the people in Africa, understanding what we just got through talking about how much of Zionist Israel's domestic economic prosperity was based on exploiting Africa, this inspired a lot of areas of Africa to support the Palestinian struggle against the Zionist state of Israel, as they should. And if you study that history, even just vaguely study, you'll know that many areas in Africa served as launching pads for Palestinian commando groups, Palestinian resistance against the Zionist state of Israel. They couldn't operate anywhere in the Middle East because most of those places are satellite states for imperialism. Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, Kuwait, those are nothing but Arab satellite states for imperialism. So there weren't really many other places that the Palestinian resistance could stage itself. So Africa, for the most part, in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, served that purpose. So you had the situation in Entebbe in Uganda, for example. You had the Eritreans who were highly supportive of the Palestinian movement. The Palestinians staged their operations against the Zionist state of Israel in these areas. And as a result of that, the Zionist state of Israel waged war on Africa for allowing these Palestinians to exist there and to stage their operations against the evil state of Israel. And so the militarization of, as you know, the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank began to give their structural adjustment loans and control African economies, a part of those packages, because now there isn't a single country in Africa that isn't dominated by these imperialist banking institutions today. And to enable them as a part of that package was using Zionist Israel in its efforts to militarize these African areas in Africa. And the picture you see on the screen is these Zionists in Africa training African military, training African police agencies to in Krav Maga, the Israeli Defense Force method of hand-to-hand self-defense, and providing them with weapons and military apparatus to repress the resistance movements, like the Eritrean People's Liberation Front, as I said, had great relationships with Palestinian resistance movements. That's why they've engaged in these efforts all over Africa and created so much instability in Africa. And I talked about Entebbe in Uganda, and this is why the Zionist state of Israel was a major contributor to the coup d'etat in 1971 in Uganda that overthrew the government of Milton Obote. That's why they did that. It's because they wanted to punish Uganda for supporting the Palestinian resistance. And again, the reason why Africa was doing this was because of Zionist Israel's exploitation of African resources. And now today, in another effort to do that, Zionist Israel today provides $100 million in military weapons, aid, and training to Ethiopia, the government of Ethiopia, which serves as imperialism's police force in Eastern Africa, repressing the people in Somalia, repressing even people in Ethiopia. The Eritrean struggle gained independence from Ethiopia, but now you have, the Tigray situation in Ethiopia. Now you have the Oromo situation in Ethiopia. And the Oromo people are some of that region there is one of the oldest regions in the world where many of the Falasha came from. And the Falasha were the first known Jewish people in the world. That's why the people in Ethiopia confused about this question of the real homeland for Jews have found themselves, unfortunately, traveling from Ethiopia to Zionist Israel and expecting to be honored and respected as citizens because they are the original Jews on the planet Earth, African people. And because of this, they have been treated with complete scorn and disrespect in the Zionist state of Israel. And this is just a very unfortunate situation. But all of this is happening. They always talk about, well, why are these people coming here? These Zionists, well, why are these people coming here? They never talk about the reasons why they're coming. The same way you have indigenous people trying to get into the United States of America, not because this is such a great and wonderful place, but U.S. policies through the International Monetary Fund, NAFTA policies, GATT policies, destabilizing all of the economies in Central, South America, and the Caribbean. This has forced people, in order to find some level of stability to protect their families, to go somewhere else, because these cartels, these criminal cartels, there's nothing there to protect the people against them. They've been able to operate with complete impunity because all of the social services have been devastated by structural adjustment, the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, so that more money could be made for imperialism. Well, the same thing in East Africa and the Horn. Because of the destabilization efforts of Zionism and imperialism, people have left. And unfortunately, people have thought they could find some peace in the Zionist state of Israel. And this is just, one of the another example of one of the many contradictions that exist with these people when all they're really trying to do is continue to perpetuate complete destabilization in Africa so that they can continue to justify, so they can continue to ensure that Africa is destabilized. And this will allow them to continue their exploitation of African resources to finance the illegal and immoral state of Israel and its quest to continue to colonize Palestinian land and Palestinian people. And so we have to understand what all this means, this control and what it means for African people. The Zionist movement has a long history of exploiting African liberation movements all over the earth, not just on the continent of Africa. In the 1920s, the World Zionist movement, which worked with the Third Reich and the Nazi regime in Germany to encourage it to continue to oppress its Jewish populations, because Europe, as you know, has a long history of religious intolerance. That's why Europeans are here in the Western Hemisphere. They taught you that in school. Well, they left Europe because of religious intolerance. Goddamn pilgrims, Puritans, and all these filthy people came here escaping religious intolerance. They taught you that in school. At least they told you that much. That much is true. So this is no different. The Jews were viciously exploited in Europe. And so because of that, the World Zionist Congress, again, these people, their objective was to create a world power to serve the interests of imperialism. So they worked with all of these anti-Judaic countries, Romania, Poland, Germany, Russia. They worked with all of them and encouraged them, yes, continue to exploit your Jewish populations, because that will make them much more likely to support this Zionist state of Israel that we're attempting to create. And this has been something that the World Zionist Congress is doing 100 years ago. And one of their methods to raise money for this backward and illegal efforts that they were engaged in was to manipulate our people, because the word Zion means to return home. And we, more than any other people on the planet Earth, are emotionally tied to the concept of returning home. Even those of us who were confused by capitalism here, and I ain't no African, we still know goddamn well we don't belong here. We know this is not ours. We can say as much as we want, I'm an American. We can say that till we're blue in the face. We can vote. We can do every damn thing these people tell us to do. We know that we are not welcome in this society. There is not an African alive, I don't care what the hell they say, that does not know that we are not welcome in this society. So even if we want to fool ourselves into thinking that that's not the case, our enemies know that that's the case, because they're the ones perpetuating the terror against us. So they manipulated it in the 1920s, and they said, well, we're trying to get home too, and we should work together, and we should support each other in our efforts to get home. The difference was we were trying to get home to our legitimate home, Africa, that we were stolen from. These goddamn people were trying to steal somebody else's land, talking about they're returning home, somewhere they've never been before. They never found ever. They were nowhere close to being. Nowhere close to being. You can't produce a single shred of evidence, and not one of these goddamn people have done it, to illustrate that white people, like the people that are in Zionist Israel today, because that's who they are. They're white people from Europe. That's exactly who they are. You can't provide one shred of evidence today that indicates that those people were there in that region known as Palestine in thousands of years ago. You can't produce one shred of evidence because it didn't happen. They were not the people that were there. So this is the problem that we're trying to help make sure that we understand that the Zionist movement has manipulated us. They used the NAACP in the 1920s, the World Zionist Congress did, to sponsor a speaking tour for Chaim Weizmann, the president of the World Zionist Congress then, to raise money for the Zionist movement for the state of Israel. They did that, and we finance it because we have a soft spot in our hearts for anybody trying to find home, because we're still trying to find home. We don't even know where our home is. We think we want to believe it's here. We know it's not. We know nothing about Africa. We're too intellectually lazy to pick up a book about Africa. So we're lost in this hole in space. So these people come along and say, hey, help us get home. And we're like, okay, I can't get home because I'm too lazy to find out how to do it and get involved in the movement for me to get home, but I'll help these people get home. And I don't know the difference because I don't study anything. And they said they're trying to get home, so I believe them. I believe everything white folks tell me, so I believe that. So this is what happened 100 years ago. And so today we must see our role as that of building a consistent propaganda campaign against Zionism for the evil system that it is. That's what we have to do. When Shakura talks about we have to be as against Zionism as anybody on earth, this is what she's talking about, you all, because we have to understand the Palestinians defeating the Zionist state of Israel, that weakens the Zionist system's hold against our African, against the exploitation of Africa. It weakens that. We want this. This is good for us. And not only that, Zionism has historically not only exploited Africa, but exploited African liberation movements everywhere, as it says on the screen. In 1985, the Nation of Islam, Minister Louis Farrakhan, invited Muammar Gaddafi, then the leader of the Libyan Socialist Jamahiriya, to speak to the annual Nation of Islam Saviors Day in Chicago, Illinois, here in the United States of America. And Muammar Gaddafi was there via, they called it closed circuit. This is before streaming, before the internet. They called it closed circuit TV. And Muammar Gaddafi was beamed in, and he spoke to the Saviors Day audience. And he told them that you're not Americans. You should ally yourself with Africa, the correct message. We weren't ready to hear it. He said, you should get out of the U.S. military. I'll give you arms to overthrow the U.S. government. We weren't prepared to hear that. But the point, and many of you today ain't prepared to hear it. You love Uncle Sam. But that's not the point. The point I'm making is that the Zionist state of Israel, when this happened in 1985, they were already focused in on the Nation of Islam, the All African People's Revolutionary Party, any entity. You can see it. They published a book in 1991 called Black Demagogues and Hate Mongers, and we're prominently featured in that book. They call them the Anti-Defamation League, a Zionist organization. We call them ADL. We call them the African Death League. They still exist. They published this book in 1991. They said we were the most anti-Zionist organization in the U.S., and to this day, I consider it an absolute honor. And so they came after Farrakhan and the nation for having Gaddafi come there, because Gaddafi was one of the most consistent anti-Zionists in the world. That's one of the reasons why they wanted to get rid of him. Aside from the African currency, the dinar that he was attempting to use Libyan gold to back and create in 2011 when Obama murdered him. But my point is that here today we have this understanding based on studying history that these people came after our liberation movements even outside of Africa, because we know that going back to the 1960s, when the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee had the courage to come out against the Zionist state of Israel in what they call it the Arab-Israeli War in 1967, and SNCC came out because of the paper written by Ethel Miner, that the Zionist movement has been solved in at that point, that the lie that they've been telling since the 1920s with the World Zionist Congress, we're fighting the same fight. They knew we would no longer fall for that lie. So they began to, instead of trying to pretend like they were our friends, they began to actively sabotage our movements. They sabotaged the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. They've been sabotaging organizations like the AAPRP and the Nation of Islam ever since. And that is good. It's out in the open now. We don't want anything to do with anybody that's in support of Zionism. We want to completely destroy Zionism. They've never been our friends. They've never been on the front line with us. They've never been on that. I'm not saying there haven't been. Of course, there've been individual people that are Jewish that participated in the civil rights movement. Michael Swarn or Andrew Goodman. Of course, we know that better than you do. But as a collective force, our point is that the Zionist movement, the Zionist state of Israel, has done nothing but create sabotage in Africa. The number one weapon used and desired by our people engaged in destructive activity against each other is the Israeli-made Uzi submachine gun. You can find them in plentiful supply in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, in Kingston, Jamaica, in Johannesburg, Tanzania, South Africa, in Los Angeles, California, United States of America. And you think this is an accident and a coincidence? This is a part of their effort to continue to sabotage us, because the more disorganized and unstable we are, the easier it is for them to continue to exploit Africa's resources. That's what it's all about. And this is the reason why any conscious African must be anti-Zionist, And any African running around here talking about we ain't got nothing to do with those Arabs, that's a dumbass African right there. I don't care how articulate they might be. That's a dumbass African that it really has no real desire and concern to see African people free on a worldwide basis. And if you don't want to see African people free on a worldwide basis, you don't want to see African people free anywhere, because we cannot be free in one place and still oppressed in other places, because our exploitation and oppression is worldwide. It was based on a worldwide system of colonization, imperialism, and capitalism. So it cannot be solved in one country or in one neighborhood. I mean, even a child can understand that. So anybody saying those types of things is not really concerned, you all, about any true African liberation. Any conscious African must be anti-Zionist. And we thank you for joining us. And we have a lot of information. If you're looking at the screen, in the upper left-hand corner, you can see all of our programs. Just use the QR code there, and you have an opportunity to see all of our programs. You can go to our Forward Ever shop. If you're going to be participating in these people's backward holidays this month, then if you're buying presents, then at least buy some conscious clothing that your people can wear and advance a method of revolutionary African self-determination. So go to our Forward Ever shop. All the way to do that is in the QR code in the top left corner there. You can go to betterworld.me. You can go to Hood Communist, which is a great African revolutionary African blog that features writings asking for submissions. Write something and submit it. I publish there all the time. You can do it too. We need more people to be writing about the struggle for our liberation. Go to www.aprp-intl.org. Join the All African People's Revolutionary Party. If you don't want to join the APRP, join some organization working for justice. And join us next week, Sunday, December 10th, same time, same place. We're going to have, again, a very critical topic. We're going to be talking about these people have the socialist state of Cuba and our sister Assata Shakur on their national and international terrorist list. Take Cuba and Assata off of your goddamn terrorist list. There is a national mounting movement to call for this, but we don't make any demands of the capitalist system. Instead, what we're doing is trying to raise your consciousness so that we can build the type of revolutionary movement that can run right over their chests. So join us next week if you want to know more about this effort to criminalize and label Cuba terrorist, criminalize and label our sister Assata Shakur terrorist, and you want to know more about that, join us next week. That's what we're going to be talking about. And again, at the bottom right, the QR code for the Burkina Books program, for the Thomas Sankara Center for Liberation and Pan-African Unity, a program sponsored by the All African People's Revolutionary Party in Burkina Faso, the Sahel region in West Africa. And my book, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence. Please continue to buy it. I'm taking a trip next week to a region to help folks organize an anti-fascist network that are having problems with white supremacists and fascists. The way, as I've said many times, I fund my travels and ability to do this work is by proceeds I get from this book. And you should want the book anyway, because it's a good book to help you understand how to organize against these systems of oppression that we're dealing with. It's only $8 US. So please tell people, buy it. It should blow up. The more it blows up, the more I can do. And I want to do more. We thank you for joining us today. Stay strong, stay up, stay positive, forward ever, backwards never. Join an organization working for justice, because organization is the weapon for the oppressed. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday evening.